This whole Elon Musk alleged Nazi salute situation is bringing up strong emotions for both sides of a political aisle. Some people on the left are convinced that Elon Musk intentionally threw up a Nazi salute, and for them, it confirms their worst fears about the election of Trump leading to the rise of fascism and outright neo-Nazism in America. Others on the right are equally convinced that this was simply an innocent, heartfelt gesture from Elon that is being misconstrued and admittedly awkward, but certainly not an intentional sign of Nazism. They view the people on the left as being alarmist and subject to a mainstream media hoax. And there are many people in the middle who just don't know what to think. This is an important moment, not just because of what Elon did, but what it reveals about our own psychological biases, the difficulty of discerning truth in the information age, and how both logic and emotions are important to consider when events like this happen. So I'm making this video with a few intentions in mind. For the left, I'm hoping to bring you some calm, clarity, and perspective on what Elon did and why you might not need to be as afraid as leaders in politics are telling you that you need to be. For people on the right, I want to help you understand why the left is afraid and what you can help them do about it. And for everyone, I want to offer you a mental model and critical thinking tips that can help you cut through a lot of the noise and the confusion to get as close to the truth as you can with a reasonable perspective that considers both sides. So I'm going to take this in 4 steps. First, I'm going to summarize the best argument in support of the idea that Elon intentionally threw up a Nazi salute. Then I'm going to summarize the best argument against that. Third, I'm going to comment on how I think Elon Musk could have handled this better, assuming that he was acting in good faith. And finally, I'm going to provide a mental model and some tips for how to navigate complex situations like this that involved a lot of different psychological perspectives. But first, a disclaimer. There is no such thing as an unbiased information source, and that includes me as well. There are the facts, but when presenting the facts, we all make a bunch of subjective decisions about what facts to include versus not include, the facts that we emphasize versus de-emphasize, and even the order in which we present those facts. All of that forms a context and framing through which we perceive those facts, and that's why we call it news stories. Every human on planet Earth has biases, me included. So rather than pretending to be unbiased, I'm going to make sure that my biases are as explicit as possible so that you can check them and I can check them too. Personally, I like Elon Musk. I don't know him very well personally, but I've consumed a lot of interviews involving him. I've also read his biography, and I've studied the guy pretty closely just because I find him fascinating. I also respect him immensely as a visionary and entrepreneur. I've also personally benefited a lot from his advocacy on X. In the last several months, Elon has discovered my content and has heavily promoted it, which has been really positive for my own public standing. I'm really grateful to him for that, and I told him as much in the one private DM we've ever had. Now, I don't know him personally, but I also think it's reasonable to say that the fact that I've consumed many interviews with him, I'm on X a lot, and I've read his biography means that I have more comprehensive view of him than the average person who's only hearing about him from media headlines. But it's also reasonable to say that I'm somewhat prone to confirmation bias here. So yes, I like Elon, and I love the truth. And my goal in all of my videos is to help me understand the truth better and help you get closer to the truth as well. Take all of that for what you will. I encourage you to listen to voices who disagree with me and filter all of that through your own critical thinking and decide for yourself what makes the most sense. So to start off this analysis, let's watch the whole clip in context, because some mainstream media outlets, as well as individual influencers online, have been selectively editing the clip to exclude audio from Elon. So here's the full thing.
Elections that come and go. Some elections are, important. Some are not. But this one, this one really mattered. And I just want to say thank you for making it happen. Thank you. My heart goes out to you. It is thanks to you that the future of civilization.
Now, first, let's talk about the hand gesture itself that Elon did, because there's some technical details here of note. Some people on the left say that this is clearly a Nazi salute and there's no ambiguity about it. Some people on the right have actually pointed out that this might be a Roman salute, and they point out Elon's historical affection for Roman history. Note that in the video, Elon has his palm on his heart and he extends it outward. The original Nazi salute that Hitler did involves the palm facing downward, not placing it on the heart. However, usage of that salute has evolved over time, and there are neo-Nazi groups who put their hand closer to their heart or on their shoulder when doing the salute. Some people have pointed out that it might be a Roman salute based on this clip from the TV show Rome. Now, it's unclear whether the Roman salute was actually popular, but I think it's fair to say that even if there was a Roman salute that involved placing the hand near the heart, it's nowhere near as recognizable as a neo-Nazi salute. So it's understandable why people would see the salute and think that it resembles a Nazi salute. I actually watched the speech live, and even though I didn't think that Elon was intentionally espousing neo-Nazism or fascism, I immediately recognized what it could look like. So here I think it's reasonable to say we don't know what Elon was actually thinking, but we do know what it looks like. So it's fair to say that this closely resembles a Nazi salute, even if it's not exactly the same. So now I'm going to make the best argument of the left that this was an intentional act by Elon to signal neo-Nazi or fascist support. And in order to understand that worldview, it's important to look at what the media landscape has looked like for the last 10 years. For the last 10 years in America, much of mainstream media has subjected Donald Trump to extreme scrutiny and regularly compared him to Hitler, Nazis, and fascism. We have people in this country who have been told since they were 8 years old that Donald Trump is the next Hitler, and now are 18 years old and voting. Over time, it's fair to say that universal trust of mainstream media has gone down significantly, with only about 31% of people say that they trust the mainstream media. But regardless of people's present mistrust of mainstream media, 5, 6, 7 years ago, people really trusted mainstream media and believed the narrative that Trump is the next Hitler. So for many of these people, Elon's association with Trump means that transitively, Elon has inherited the view of Trump as a fascist and a neo-Nazi. That's an older association, but a modern association with Elon Musk that has nothing to do with Trump is Elon's alignment with the political party in Germany, AfD, or Alternative for Deutschland. Leftists would point out that German media and officially the German government have labeled AfD as a right-wing extremist group and has been affiliated with genuine neo-Nazis. There have been verifiable incidents of both leaders and members of AfD using Nazi slogans. For example, one of the leaders, Bjorn Höcke, was fined twice by the German government for using banned Nazi slogans. So in summary, leftists would point at Elon's affiliation with Trump as well as Elon's affiliation with the AfD as evidence that he knowingly and intentionally threw up a Nazi symbol not just once, but 3 times for emphasis and clarity. So that's the argument from the left. Here's a counter argument. There are 3 logical fallacies that this argument is susceptible to that I want you to pay attention to. The first is confirmation bias. This is every human's tendency to look for evidence that confirms our existing worldview. So, for example, if you believe that Elon is genuinely a fascist, you're going to have a tendency to look for evidence confirming that he's a fascist. Or to give you another example, if you thought that Kamala Harris was a communist, you are more likely to look for evidence confirming that she's a communist. The second fallacy is group attribution error, or taking the views of an individual member of a group and projecting those views onto the entirety of the group. And this is going to be important for AfD, so keep that in mind. Third, we have guilt by association. This is both a powerful propaganda technique and a logical fallacy that discredits someone solely on the basis that they're associated with someone who is viewed negatively. And guilt by association is going to be relevant when we're talking about Elon's connections to AfD and Trump. Most of the people saying that AfD is a neo-Nazi party in America have not actually ever listened to anything directly from AfD leadership. They're operating off of what they're being told about what German media has been saying about AfD. German media and the German government have labeled AfD as a right-wing extremist organization. But the question to ask yourself here is, what are the incentives and the intentions of the German media and the German government? AfD is not a fringe group in Germany. They enjoy the support of about 20% of the German populace. That makes them the second most popular political party in Germany and a threat to the first most popular political party because they're anti-establishment. Moreover, mainstream media bias and people becoming aware of it is not a phenomenon exclusive to America. It's also happening in Germany, where over time, trust in mainstream media has decreased, and now only about 41% of Germans say that they trust that the mainstream media is telling them the truth. There are neo-Nazis associated with the AfD, just like there are communists associated with the political left. So the real question here is, are they just a fringe part of the party, or do they represent the views of the whole? It's easy to assume that the presence of neo-Nazis means that the AfD is a neo-Nazi party, but that's classic group attribution error. And the presence of an extreme within a political faction does not necessarily mean the dominance of the extreme in that faction. That said, I can see someone going either way. And I'm not a German, I'm an American. So I'm gonna give you a view, but just take this with a grain of salt. Rather than evaluating this as a binary, like AfD is a neo-Nazi party or not a neo-Nazi party, let's look at evidence on both sides. I've already mentioned evidence of people like Bjorn Hicke using statements that are Nazi slogans that are banned in Germany. However, we should also look at the leadership at the top of the party. Bjorn Hicke is a regional leader in AfD. The overall leader is a woman named Alice Weidel. Alice is actually a lesbian woman who is married to a brown Sri Lankan woman. This is not something you would typically associate with the neo-Nazi movement, which has heavy overlap with white supremacy. Weidel and other senior leaders of the party recently expelled several members of the party because of their verifiable association with extremist groups. They also replaced the entire youth wing of the party due to concerns about extremism. So it looks like the leadership of the party represents a more moderate faction of the party rather than hardliners in the party who are closer to extremist. Now you could just view this as damage control. Maybe you think that the AfD is just trying to Trojan horse in neo-Nazis under the guise of a more moderate political view. If you want to really be as informed as possible and have a nuanced view, I recommend that you actually just go listen to Alice Weidel directly say in her own words what the AfD actually represents. Elon Musk actually hosted a conversation with Alice a few weeks ago so that people could hear directly from her own mouth what she believes in. I actually listened to that conversation, and a lot of what Alice says actually echoes the MAGA movement in the United States. They stood for having stronger borders because they feel like they've been overrun by immigrants from other countries, especially Islamists who are disruptive to the social fabric in Germany. They stand for restoration of German pride and traditions, and many of them feel that the Holocaust, although obviously a horrible stain on the German legacy, has been getting in the way of Germans feeling any pride in any part of their culture at all. Now, I get that people are busy, and they're probably not going to go out of their way to listen to an hour-long conversation with a German politician when they're an American. That's understandable, but if you're not willing to listen to the person being labeled, don't buy into the label that they're being given. All that being said, I did listen to Alice, and I found everything that she said specifically about what AfD wants to do in Germany eminently reasonable. But I encourage you to watch and be the judge yourself. Part of the problem here is people who are convinced that Trump is a fascist and Elon is a fascist by association have so much confirmation bias that they're not even willing to listen to the opposite side. Rather than actually listening to people, they'll just layer guilt by association on top of that confirmation bias. And they'll say things like, well, Elon is associated with AfD and Trump, so he must be a fascist. Now, what many leaders on the political left are either ignoring or frankly just unaware of is Elon's multiple statements explicitly in support of the Jewish people and the state of Israel. Last year, in a live interview with the New York Times, Elon wore a dog tag on stage that he said that he wears every day and will continue to wear until the Israeli hostages are released from Hamas.
Do you see this thing? Mm-hmm. Do you know what it is?
I do, because I actually followed your entire trip to Israel.
Right.
Why don't you tell everybody?
This says bring them home. The hostages. It was given to me by the parents of one of the hostages. And I said I would wear it as long as there was a hostage still remaining. And I have.
Just 2 weeks ago, Elon Musk posted a video in support of Israel's actions to defeat Hamas and the Jewish people.
What set of actions result in the greater good in Israel? I mean, obviously, you cannot have people who, if they want to slaughter everyone in Israel, you got to stop that. There's no way.
And regardless of your views on Israel-Palestine, if you genuinely think that Elon did throw up an intentional neo-Nazi symbol, you need to reconcile that with the fact that he's explicitly supported Israel and Jews. Now, on top of that, there's a statement by the ADL, or Anti-Defamation League. The ADL is a pro-Jewish civil rights movement, and their explicit mandate is combating anti-Semitism. The ADL went out of their way to say that they don't think that Elon intentionally did a Nazi salute, and instead they view it as an enthusiastic gesture that he did that was awkward. And I think it's fair to say that of all the organizations, ADL has the most incentive to condemn Elon if they actually think that he was intentionally signaling to neo-Nazis. Now, strangely enough, in response to the ADL statement, one of the loudest voices on the political left, AOC, got hostile toward ADL for making their statement in defense of Elon. Despite the ADL having every incentive to condemn Elon Musk and not doing so, AOC got hostile toward ADL and told them that they're not a reputable news source and they're owned by them. And to me, it's not clear what that actually means. I mean, maybe AOC is implying that the ADL is owned by Elon Musk, but it's hard for me to make sense of that. Personally, reactions like AOC's are actually the most troubling aspect of all of this. Leaders like AOC are not bringing any curiosity or intellectual humility to the situation, or even appearing to try to understand how someone might view this differently. Instead, she's being hostile and, in my view, hysterical, not getting curious, not showing a lot of humility, and actually just stoking more of the same fears that many people who now are scared of a Trump presidency already have. And as a general rule, the more emotional and outraged that someone is, the less logical and clear they likely are. So if AOC is more interested in being effective rather than feeling right, I think she could show up better as a leader here. To be fair, I think you could make the same claim of Elon. It's perfectly understandable why anyone, American, German, or Jew, would be alarmed by Elon's gesture because, as I mentioned before, even if it's not technically a Nazi salute, it sure does look like one. People on the right have argued that Elon was simply making a heartfelt, innocent gesture, and they take his own words at face value. Many of them have also pointed out that Elon is autistic, and autistic people often don't process social cues or think about how the way that they're behaving comes across. Elon was speaking impromptu, he was clearly very excited in the moment, and he wanted to connect with the crowd. So I'm willing to take it at face value that Elon was actually just trying to extend his heart to the crowd and is not a neo-Nazi, and as evidence of that, I point to the fact that he's affiliated himself with Jewish people and Israel. But that said, I think it's obvious in hindsight how that gesture might have looked, and I think Elon could have shown more leadership by acknowledging how it could have looked to people. This is not about apologizing, because I don't think that Elon did something morally wrong. Rather, this is about leadership, and great leaders acknowledge not just the intention for their actions, but also the impact of their actions. I think Elon immediately acknowledging how it might have looked, or even acknowledging that now, would go a long way with people who are in the middle, are not ideologues, and are genuinely curious about what happened. And it's also worth saying that there are people who are so determined to be negative that no matter what Elon said afterward, it just doesn't matter for them. So that acknowledgement wouldn't be for those people. It would be for the people in the middle who would just like to feel a little bit more at ease with Elon helping call the shots about the future of America. Now, this isn't the last time that we're going to see something like this. There are going to be more confusing situations in the future that spark a lot of controversy and outrage on both sides. I totally get that it can feel overwhelming to try to make sense of everything that's going on. So here are some tips to aid you in your own critical thinking and cut through all the noise. My first recommendation is rely on primary sources, not secondary sources. The less you've listened to someone directly in long form, the more you should be skeptical of labels and narratives about that person. After all, if you are in the spotlight, that's how you'd want people to engage with you. Secondly, emotionality has an inverse relationship with logic. The more emotional someone is, the less likely it is that they've actually done their research and been logical. If you see that someone is consistently arguing with their emotions, they're probably more interested in being vindicated than verifying their beliefs. Third, recognize that we all have confirmation bias, and we all have a bunch of unconscious biases that are working in the background that we're not even aware of. And the solution to that is just intellectual humility and curiosity. Rather than immediately jumping to condemnations, start with being curious and just asking questions if something doesn't make sense to you. As a general rule, if you can't make the best argument for the opposite side, your argument is not the best that it can be. And we would all benefit from some intellectual humility. None of us has total awareness of what's even happening in our own minds, yet we're so quick to presume what's happening in someone else's. Now, on a closing note, we should all maintain a healthy skepticism of those in power. And we should be equally skeptical of ourselves.